what an intensive is for new people is we start at the end. We start with self-realization. We don't work towards something in the future. We begin the intensives always with a very clear recognition of freedom. So that's our starting point. And then we move through a lot of things after that so that it becomes doubtless, by the end of the intensive, what I call a paradigm shift has happened. And you now know yourself in a very different way than you've known before. And your life looks very different than it looked before in many ways. So after the recognition for the first few days of a full intensive, like 10 days, by the way, and I have some intensives happening here in August in India as well, 2 10-day intensives. So the first 3 days are spent on this recognition. The second 2 days are spent on what my view of devotion, which is once you've woken up to who you are and seen how valuable that is, then you naturally become devoted to truth. And that's, to me, what a true devotee is, or a true bhakta, if you know the word bhakti. For me, bhakti isn't about worshiping God or a guru. It's about worshiping truth, your own, which is you, yourself. So that's the second part of an intensive. The third part of an intensive is we deal with this question of non-doership in a real way, not in any kind of philosophical way, but in a way that actually makes a huge difference for you in your life. A big shift happens. It's the end of ego. And so what I wanted to speak about today, because the mini intensive will cover all of those topics, and you will have a very clear recognition and a shift if you join this intensive. So, but what is the work of freedom about? Because I speak about it in many different ways, So what I say, we all have all these fancy words like enlightenment and awakening and liberation and all of that. That's all fine. Those words are fine. But what I say all of those things actually mean, because we have many ideas about that, what I call it is just the natural human condition of health. Because when you came out of the womb, you were essentially healthy. And then we get very corrupted and abused and cultural imposition on our mind and religious imposition. We get very messed up and far away from our home, Actually, we're never far away from our home, but we feel like we've gotten lost. But the natural human condition, not the normal human condition, but the natural human condition is health, mental, emotional health, pure being, knowing. And that's available for everyone at all times. It's just that we don't know how to recognize that. And we don't know how to resolve the things that keep us from this recognition as well. And so, but what I want to speak about today is what the overall topic of this upcoming intensive is, which is love, actually. Because another way to speak, another word for liberation or freedom is also love as well. And why would I say that? Because a healthy mind is a mind that is free and it's free to be love itself. The more unhealthy a mind is, obviously, the less real, genuine love can be there, No fault of anyone, but that's just the result of an unhealthy mind. And we all have that to different degrees, obviously, So in speaking about love, and I've been writing about it a little bit lately on Facebook and my emails and everything, but I thought I'd speak about it again a little bit here. So what is love then? Because one way to look at love is the personal way of looking at love, which is I love you and I love my partner and I love my children and family and friends and animals and the work that I do in the world. These objects that appear in the course of my life elicit feelings of love. And that's great. And that's perfectly valid aspect of love, for sure. But I want to look at love in a little different way. because I say the root of all of that love, and the root of all of it, including the root of the opposite, if there is an opposite, but the root of everything in life, everything in the manifestation, the root of all of it is life itself, I say, is love. And I'll explain why I say that. Life itself is love. So life itself, which is not the personal corrupted mental egoic mind that we have, that's also included, by the way, everything's included. But life itself in its purity, which is who we are at essence, is all-inclusive. It does, life itself doesn't disclude anything, does it? No. Life itself is completely devoid of any judgment. There's nothing even remotely that you can consider. Life itself, everything is, nothing is judged in life. The good, the bad, the pleasant, and the unpleasant all appear equally within life and as life. So life itself is not judging anything. Life itself is unconditionally inclusive, in fact, unconditional. Life, there's no condition. Life is unconditioned and unconditional. And that's what we think real love is, unconditional, pure love. So I say that's already who you are, essentially. Your essential being, your essential nature is already that unconditioned and unconditional love. When we come to know ourselves as who we are in essence, and we go through the inquiry work that we do on an intensive together, and a paradigm shift happens, then what happens when we know ourselves as this unconditional love? Then, and I don't want to sound hyperbolic here, but a really genuinely, truly healthy mind, the natural human condition doesn't have judgment. It doesn't have hatred. It doesn't have animosity. It doesn't hold anger and revenge. Sometimes the movement of anger appears, but it doesn't hold that. It doesn't have division between myself and the other, or between one political party and another, or one culture and another, or one race or another. A healthy human mind is love, and love does not have those things, because that's the natural human condition. That's life itself. So that's what we come to discover, who we are on an intensive. So it's huge. It's not a small thing. And on an open meeting, we can touch on it, and I can, share a holiday so you get to see something. But this is not a trivial matter. It never has been. To come to this, what I call the natural human condition of health, it takes inquiry, and it takes devotion to truth. And it takes being shown. Actually, I needed to be shown, and everyone does, And it's very possible for everyone. It's very possible for everyone. The only thing that's required is a crack of light in a person's mind, which everyone here has, because that's why you're here. It only requires a crack of light so that a message of truth can get in. For many, or maybe I would say even most people, maybe, and there's no blame, because I don't know why anything is as it is, but maybe for most people, there isn't a crack of light for this message of freedom, love, and truth to enter. Okay, that's how it is. But if that is true for you, which it is because you're here, then it can happen for you, of course, absolutely. Freedom is your birthright. You've heard it said, it's your birthright. And I say, yes, it's true. That's no joke. That's the truth. And so I want everyone to have that. Of course, that's why I do what I do. To me, the message is so obvious and so simple. And it's, to me, amazing that everyone should have it. I want everyone to be free. What a world would be, so that's what I do. I want people to come to know freedom. And you can, yes. But what I wanted to speak about love today was in a different aspect as well, because if life itself is love, then everything that happens in the course of your life is the movement of love itself. Obviously, everything that happens in your life is the movement of love itself. This doesn't only include the feelings of love for our beloved people. This includes the bad things that happen to us. This includes the unpleasant things. This includes the painful things. This includes the things that feel like hell. And why do I say that? Because life, not that I don't want to anthropomorphize life because I don't see it this way, but just to be metaphorical about it, the movement of love and the movement of life itself is a movement like a river coursing back to the ocean. It's love moving back to itself, and it wants to move you back to itself, love. And how does it do it? It often does it through the painful experiences of our life. And what I often say, and many of you who know me have heard me say, ad nauseum, whatever brings you to your knees, if it turns you to truth, is grace. It's the grace of love, bringing you back to itself, to love. If whatever brings you to your knees, for whatever reason, a humbling doesn't happen or a crack of light doesn't happen, there's no fault. But if it just keeps you wallowing forever in suffering, then it's just suffering. But if whatever brings you to your knees creates a shift in some way in your life, makes a change, opens a crack of light that, and I'll speak about myself in a minute, and turns you to truth, it's grace, it's love in action, moving you back home to itself. And when you see life like this and your own life like this, you have a very different view of the things that happen in your life, a very different view. No longer is it poor me, poor me, poor me. And now it's, I have a crack of light, I'm humbled. And this is another opportunity to come back home now. This is an opportunity to come home. This is life giving me an opportunity to recognize freedom. And this is what being a devotee is, this is what being a bhakta is being devoted to freedom. And if we're not devoted to freedom, and even if we are, we're going to get our asses kicked. And then if we have a crack of light and if we're humble, we'll say, thank you very much. Again, freedom is here. So this is a very different way to look at the unpleasant and painful parts of everyone's life. And I don't care if you're awakened or enlightened, or so-called enlightened or not enlightened. I don't care what, enlightened or not. Life, it's not always pleasant. That's just the way it is, If it was intended to be always pleasant, then it would be always pleasant. But apparently that's not what's intended. So grace happened to me, because I was a rock and roll star and I was a, drug addict and a heroin junkie and all of that stuff. This is like 35, 36 years ago now, a long time ago. And I had no interest at all in any spirituality, nothing. I mean, when I was a teenager, I playing my guitar and listening to the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix and all that great music and being in bands and smoking weed, not one iota. I turned away from Christianity and God very early and had no room for that. I thought it was complete nonsense. I still do. Christianity, the religious aspect, not the truths propounded by a so-called someone maybe named Jesus. There's truth there, but religion itself, I feel, no, that's not truth. But anyway, I digress because that I got turned away from that very young. And so for the next 25 years of my life, Not a single thought of any spirituality or meditation or anything ever entered my mind. It was the farthest thing from my mind completely. I wanted to be a rock star and play music and party and take drugs, and I did for a long time. And when I was 39, I was brought to my fucking knees, man, which from the outside probably would have looked horrible. And in the moment, it was the most misery I ever experienced in my life. I was literally brought to my knees. I'm not going to go into the entire story here, but literally brought to my knees and begging for help. And in that moment, everything changed. Everything. That moment, I mean, literally that moment, I became a spiritual seeker, and I hadn't done that my entire life, not even a thought. But I knew something changed, something opened, my head cracked open, and I became a spiritual seeker, and I got on the path of spiritual seeking for 8 years until I finally met a teacher who helped me come to the end. That's the short story. So that movement that happened to me and happens to many people, but for me, I don't know why, for me, it brought me to my knees and created a shift. That movement from the outside looked horrible. And even to me at the time, it looked horrible. But that movement was absolutely love. It was life cracking my head open and saying, wake up and come back to me. And it happened, and I did. And then one pointedly for the next 8 years, with one thought in my mind for 8 years, what is liberation? It was the only thing I could think about. I mean, I had a life, got married and all that stuff, but my overall overriding thought and intention that whole 8 years was, what is liberation? And I went everywhere, and I lived with Indian masters, and I read and I meditated, had countless experiences, spiritual experiences, everything, until I came to the end when I met someone who just very simply showed me, which I do now, very simply, for one who's ready. So in my life, that was a huge moment of love that happened, and it brought me back to itself. And everyone here has a story or many stories to tell about the movements of their life. And many of us have, and I'm very respectful of this, because some people and many people we all have some trauma. Of course, everybody has a little trauma. Some people have a lot of trauma. And I have a lot of compassion for that and respect. I really do. But why can even that be love's movement to turn you back to truth, to itself? What if you could think of it that way, Then it can take a very different perspective in the way you are, in how you see these things that have happened to you. It can give you a very different view. So all of the work I do is about coming back home to truth, to freedom, and to love. That's my work. That's what I do. I use the word freedom mostly, I've been using for years, but I've recently started more using the word love, because it is the same thing, actually. So this intensive its overriding theme is, and to keep in mind as we're going through this intensive, is that's what we're doing here, That's what we're doing. We're coming to know the true love of which is who we are. And we'll go through a lot of inquiries together on this intensive, a lot of experiments. If you know me, which many of you do from intensives, I'm not a philosopher. I don't give a shit about philosophy. It doesn't mean anything to me at all. My only interest is with very simple words for you to recognize freedom and have a paradigm shift, a shift of being, a shift. Something happens, you shift. And it's from knowing, and it comes from knowing what the Bible says, know what's true. And knowing what's true will set you free. It will change you. And it happens and people here can tell you that's true. It happens, and it can happen for you, and it will. And we'll do many inquiries and experiments and very direct, you'll see for yourself. You see for yourself. Who cares? Doesn't me. I'm not a guru, I'm not a guru. I don't care at all. I have no interest in that. I know a simple message that's very obvious, and I want, hey, come on, have it, have it, have it, have it. And so I make it as simple as possible and as direct as possible in plain English. I'm from New Jersey, man. I don't speak, highfalutin, British, nothing wrong with British, it's great, but I don't speak the Queen's English, put it that way. I speak New Jersey, which is good. It's good because I'm not at a higher level than anyone. We're all the same. And I want to make it very simple for everyone to recognize. Okay, good. So that's all I want to say about that. And so anyway, it's starting in a week, and I hope some of you would like to join, and you'll see, you won't regret it. If you come to these meetings and you haven't done an intensive, what are you waiting for? Let's get it done.